God bless America. Hello, everybody. I am the Talk Radio Protege. This is the Protege program. Thank you so much for joining me. I've got a couple of things to talk about with you today. The first of which comes from this headline. Breaking news, North Korea threatens to cancel nuclear summit with Trump because blah, blah, blah. The reason for this threat is not the reason that North Korea says it is. But to explain that, I want to take a couple of moments to explain negotiations with you. Now, in a negotiation, there's a weak party and a strong party, typically. The weak party is typically the party that is approaching the table. The weak party is the party that will make the most concessions. You are, for example, you go to a big box store to buy some things. In those negotiations, you're a weak party. In fact, you might be the weakest party in any negotiation scenario because the big box store has a lot of demand for the product they want to sell. In fact, if you don't buy their products from the big box store, it's a virtual certainty that someone else will come along after you and they will purchase the product from the big box store. So for that reason, the big box store is not going to negotiate with you. They've decided that it is not worth the time or the effort to secure your patronage specifically. Someone else is going to come along and offer them theirs. There's another scenario where you can be a little bit stronger of a negotiator. That's if you're purchasing a very big ticket item, like a vehicle. When you go to the auto store, try this. If you've never purchased a vehicle and used this tactic before, give it a try. You might be surprised at the result. Go into the vehicle store and say, I want to purchase this vehicle. I want to pay this much for it. The dealer or the salesman, whoever you're talking to, will say, we can't do that price. We can do this price. And the price that he offers might be a little bit less than the sticker price of the car. In return of him saying, we can do this price, say, no thanks, and walk out. You might be surprised at the results. I've been in a negotiation scenario where I walked into a vehicle store with my grandfather. He was helping me negotiate. And he said, we want to pay this much. And the salesman said, we can't do that. We can do this much. And my grandfather said, all right, we're leaving now. And we turned around and we walked out of the store. 5 seconds later, the salesman came out after us and said, we can do this price. And it wasn't the price that we wanted to do, but it wasn't the first price that the salesman offered. So in terms of negotiations, walking away from the table puts you in a stronger position in terms of negotiations. And when it comes to deals that are made less often, like, for instance, diplomatic negotiations, walking away from the table can give you tremendous negotiating power. And I think that North Korea knows this. Donald Trump also knows this, and North Korea, I think, knows it. It's why they're walking away from the table at this time. There was a negotiation or a meeting that was scheduled between North and South Korea that was supposed to happen today that North Korea canceled with only a few hours' notice. That's putting South Korea and the U.S. on notice that North Korea is willing to walk away from the table if they don't get what they want. That is North Korea putting itself in a position of strength. Now, you can compare this to the Iran deal. Let's compare this to the Iran deal. What was the negotiating positions of Iran and the United States in crafting the Iran deal? Well, as I've told you before, the U.S., by the virtue of the fact that the Obama administration was heading up negotiations, the U.S. did not want a deal. There was nothing in particular that the U.S. wanted. They just wanted Iran to cooperate with them. That's all the United States and the Obama administration wanted in terms of the Iran deal. And Iran wanted all kinds of things. And because the U.S. wanted Iran to cooperate, they were willing to give Iran all sorts of concessions, all kinds of sacrifices. And the Trump administration, in terms of negotiating with North Korea, is in the position of strength because North Korea is coming to the table. Kim Jong-un walked across the demilitarized zone into South Korea. Kim Jong-un had to release a few political prisoners. He is in a very weak position in terms of negotiating strength, and he's trying to bolster that position with this little stunt. So I don't think you should be too concerned. The best way that the United States could react to this stunt would be to say, so what? We don't care if you walk away from the table. That puts the U.S. back in the position of strength. It's the position that the big box retailer takes when you choose to walk out of the store without buying their product. The big box retailer says, we don't care if you don't buy our product. Someone will come along later that will want to buy our product. That should be the position of the United States of America. We don't care if you don't want to negotiate North Korea, because eventually you will. Eventually it will be in your best interests to negotiate with us. We are putting these sanctions on, and we're not interested in relinquishing any of our power as a negotiating party. That would be the best course of action for the U.S. to take. The worst thing that they could do, the thing that would be the most weakening in terms of negotiations, would be to begin begging North Korea to come back from to the table. That's what the Obama administration did with Iran. Iran spent the entire negotiating terms with the U.S. grasping at their ankles, begging them not to leave the table. And that put Iran in a tremendously powerful negotiating position. By contrast, the U.S. would be in a very powerful negotiating position if they did not beg the North Koreans to stay at the table. If instead they said, we don't care if you leave the table, eventually you must come to the table. So we're going to sit here and wait. That's only one story that I wanted to talk about today. The other one, now I saw this headline on the Drudge Report recently where Connecticut had signed legislation joining the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. And I had kind of let it go at the time. I didn't know how much there was that I could add to the conversation, and there were other things to talk about. But today I wanted to talk about it. Today this piece was written at the Patriot Post, and I would encourage you to go read it. It came with this illustration. In the Electoral College, all states are given balanced consideration. Not equal consideration, but balanced consideration. In terms of the popular vote, all states are not given balanced representation. The states, as you can see, with more population have more of an impact on the vote. We may have talked about this in the past. We may have talked a little bit about this because Hillary Clinton has been blaming the Electoral College for her loss in 2016. In fact, the only candidates who have lost the Electoral College vote and won the popular vote have been Democrats. So it has been Democrats that have been complaining that the Electoral College should be repealed and we should go to a popular vote system. Now, I haven't done a lot of research, and we haven't talked any about the founders' positions on the popular vote. But the Patriot Post provides us with a quote from Federalist number 68, written by Alexander Hamilton, that states this: "The Electoral College affords a moral certainty that the office of president will never fall to the lot of any man who is not in an eminent degree endowed with the requisite qualifications. Talents for low intrigue and the little arts of popularity may alone suffice to elevate a man to the first honors in a single state, but it will require other talents and a different kind of merit to establish him in the esteem and confidence of the whole Union, or of so considerable a portion of it as would be necessary to make him a successful candidate for the distinguished office of the President of the United States. Now, that's a lot of wordiness, especially for today's Americans' ability to read and comprehend the English language. I don't mean that as an insult to any one of you in particular. It's a little wordy for me even. I want to try and break this down a little bit for you. Think about the popular vote. In fact, think about the popular vote as the Patriot Post tells us in this paragraph. Over 20% of Clinton's 65.8 million votes came from California and New York alone. Take those two blue states out of contention and she would have lost the popular vote by 3 million votes. Clinton didn't campaign hard enough in the Rust Belt, losing states she mistakenly assumed would stay in her column. This is the power of the Electoral College. The states of California and New York have the greatest population. And let's see, and then it's Texas. There's a lot of folks in Florida. There's a lot of folks in Ohio. A national popular vote system would demand that candidates spend the majority of their time, or any electoral system demands that candidates spend the majority of their time where it is the most efficient to spend it. When it comes to the Electoral College, this means in states with a high number of electoral votes and or swing states. Now, just in case you don't know, swing states are states where the electoral votes are in much more flux than other states. You know who's not considered a swing state? California, New York, Texas, Oklahoma. A lot of states that are deep, deep red or deep, deep blue are not considered swing states. Swing states are states like Ohio and Florida. I believe West Virginia was or has been a swing state in the past. This election cycle, Trump managed to flip a lot of states from where they were previously assumed to be held, like the Rust Belt. I believe Pennsylvania. I believe Wisconsin was one of them. I believe Minnesota was one of them. Maybe not Minnesota. Wisconsin, Minnesota, and one other. The name escapes me for some reason. But there were 3 states. The productive arm of blue-collar workers were considered to... It used to be called the Blue Wall. But Trump managed to break through the blue wall, managed to flip one of those states. This is the power of the Electoral College. In terms of a popular vote, where states like Minnesota and Wisconsin might not matter, where states like Ohio and West Virginia might not matter, all of a sudden they're very important. Now, some elements of the left complain about the representation that places like Wyoming gets. Wyoming gets, I think it's 3 Electoral College votes, compared to California's 55. I remember watching a video about this in right around the time of the election in 2016. This gives Wyoming's residents more weight compared to Californians. The number, I don't recall exactly, but the number is somewhere in the hundreds of thousands of Californians per electoral vote, and a couple of thousands of Wyoming residents per electoral vote. And the opinion of the person that was doing the presentation at the time was that the Electoral College system gives much more weight to Wyoming voters. But something else that the Electoral College does is it spreads out the electoral voting power. When the election is decided by popular vote, the electoral power is concentrated in the areas with the most population density. also the areas of the highest population, because a city like Oklahoma City might have a similar population density to a city like I'm not 100% sure about the numbers, but might have a similar population density to a suburb of Los Angeles, or a suburb of Dallas, or a suburb of Austin. But the population is just not there to make campaigning in Oklahoma City very valuable. As I think the picture illustrates, the flyover states are much more important in the Electoral College than they are in the popular vote. This gives voice to a lot more kinds of people with a lot broader base of issues and a lot broader base of opinions, because metropolitan voters tend to think similarly. It's no coincidence, I think, that the metro areas of the country tend to vote Democrat and the rural areas of the country tend to vote Republican. It's because they have different values. And by putting in a popular vote system, you elevate the voting power of the metropolitan voters, elevating the power of the Democrat voters. Now, I know that this can come across as tribalistic, and I would be lying if I told you that I didn't like the Electoral College because it gave Republicans a boost. That would be a lie if I told you I didn't think that was a good thing for the country. But the Electoral College gives voice to a wide range of people, a wide range of beliefs. It makes the election cycle, puts a lot bigger question mark on the election cycle. Some of you that know your election history better than I do will know of other examples, but California used to be a deep red state, and if you were born after 1990, you probably didn't know that. I didn't know that for the longest time. It takes an exceptional amount of knowledge of history to know that California used to be a deep red state. But suddenly, it flipped. It's now considered a Democrat stronghold. Perhaps Democrat strongholds will flip and become deep red in the future. The truth of the Electoral College is not what Democrats want you to believe it is. First of all, Electoral College votes aren't as rock steady as Democrats want you to think. The popular vote, Democrats tend to think that the popular vote is much more rock steady than the Electoral College. The truth about the popular vote is that it can be swayed a little bit more easily. You know, you think of in terms of the low information voter. What does the low information voter vote on? Well, the low information voter votes on the most recent thing in their mind. It's why the October surprise is so impactful. The popular vote is swayed a lot more by these issues simply because there's a lot more low information voters than there are high information voters. Now, we could spend so much more time on this, and I don't want to get bogged down in the weeds, so I think I'm going to call it there. I'm also going to call it there because I want to hear your take on these things. Let me know in the comments what your opinion is on both of these issues, the Kim Jong-un negotiation posturing and the Electoral College versus the popular vote. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed it. Leave a like if you did. Hit subscribe and hit the bell for notifications if you want to see more content like this. Again, thank you so much for watching. Check back every weekday for a new report. And until next time, have a good night and God bless.